Carlos Alcaraz surprises the tennis world with his quick recovery. The Mercian did not suffer from the ankle discomfort he carried during his previous match in Tokyo against Sebas Baez. The world number 1, the Spaniard Carlos Alcaraz, dispelled doubts about his left ankle, injured on Thursday in the duel against the Argentine Sebastián Baez, and emphasized that against the Belgian Zizou Bergs he played normally after the work carried out by his physiotherapist, whom he described as the best in the world. The Mercian was treated intensely by his trainer, Juanjo Moreno, who put the injured foot, twisted by a sprain, back in shape. I have said it before and I'll say it again. I have the best physiotherapist in the world, in whom I trust 100%. The work he has done on my ankle has been wonderful, he said. I was able to play normally and that was great, added the Mercian, who highlighted the difficulty of the last few hours. It was tough and a very important day and a half. I had to recover as best as possible, he admitted. With caution, Carlos Alcaraz, qualified for the quarterfinals in Beijing, acknowledged the uncertainty he was subjected to at certain moments. Sometimes I worried about some movements, when I felt the ankle, but overall I played great tennis, a great match, insisted the Spaniard, who will face the American Brandon Nakashima in the quarterfinals. It's true that there were moments when I was somewhat worried. I felt a certain anxiety about seeing how the ankle would respond in such a demanding match, said Alcaraz, who won in 80 minutes, 6-4, 6-2, over the Belgian player. Fritz insists that beating Alcaraz or Sinner is essential for Grand Slam glory. Taylor Fritz said on Friday, September 26, that he hopes Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner continue to dominate the Grand Slams, but that he cannot count on their absence if he wants to win one. World number 1 Alcaraz and number 2 Sinner have played all the Grand Slam finals this year, with the American Fritz being the last player to break the duopoly. Fritz, currently world number 5, reached the final of last year's US Open, where he lost to the Italian Sinner. The American, who beat Portuguese Nuno Borges 7-5, 7-6-4 on Friday at the Japan Open, said he cannot be afraid of facing the top 2 if he wants to win his first Grand Slam title. I can't count on being able to do it in a slam where they randomly lose early or something like that, said Fritz. I need to play at a level where, on a Grand Slam day, I can beat one of them and get it that way. I can't count on them not being there, I feel like they'll always be there. Fritz reached last year's US Open final, taking advantage of the huge gap left by the early exits of Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. The Frenchman eliminated 2020 runner-up Alexander Zverev in the quarterfinals, after defeating the 8th seed and 2022 finalist Casper Ruud in the round of 16. I beat who I was supposed to beat to reach the final, and it's becoming increasingly obvious that this probably won't happen very often, said Fritz. So if you want to reach the final, you're going to have to go through one of those guys. Fritz beat Alcaraz at the Laver Cup last week and could face the Spaniard again in the final in Tokyo this week. Alcaraz began his campaign with a 6-4, 6-2 victory over Argentine Sebastián Baez on Thursday, but the Spaniard injured his ankle early in the match. Fritz, the tournament's number 2 seed, had some difficulties against Borges, world number 51, but secured his spot in the quarterfinals against fellow American Sebastian Corda. I got myself in trouble losing breaks when I normally wouldn't, he said. But I did a good job fighting and coming back into the sets when I was down. Sinner admits in Beijing that the loss to Alcaraz in New York has made him change aspects of his tennis that he is working on. Ambition to improve, desire for redemption, and an impeccable work ethic. That's what Jannik Sinner projects on and off the court, as he showed with his statements at the press conference ahead of the start of the ATP 500 Beijing 2025. The Italian admitted he is in the process of changing things in his tennis due to the loss to Alcaraz at the US Open. A paradigm shift for Jannik Sinner and an excellent attitude to face it. It's never pleasant to be displaced from world number 1 and lose a Grand Slam final, but the Italian seems to have accepted that the only answer is to step out of his comfort zone, take risks, and look for solutions. Aware that the ATP 500 Beijing 2025 can be a good testing ground for these changes, he reflected at the press conference on what he expects from the coming days in the Chinese city and what his rivalry with Carlos Alcaraz means to him. It's great to compete again. I feel that my body and mind are in top shape after the break I was able to take after the US Open. I really want to compete here in China, and I'll try to adapt as best as possible, said a man with 2 titles to his name who should reach this final stretch of the year fresher than his rivals, having been out for 3 months due to the sanction that has greatly conditioned his season. Jannik Sinner admits to making changes in his tennis motivated by his rivalry with Carlos Alcaraz. Asked about this, the Italian was blunt. Everything I've had to go through this year hasn't been easy. I've been able to play few tournaments. This is the 8th I'm playing all year and the season is already in its final stretch, but I'm very motivated because my team and I decided to focus on working on new things after what happened in New York, admitted Sinner, who stressed how important it is for him to change aspects of his tennis to be able to compete with greater guarantees against Alcaraz. We reflected a lot on the US Open final and decided to change small details in my tennis that we're working on now. It's normal that I may make more mistakes than usual in the next matches, but it's only a matter of time before things work. I feel good in training with these timings, we'll see how long it takes me to transfer it to competition. I'm very motivated to work on new things, concluded a Jannik Sinner who will seek the title at the ATP 500 Beijing 2025. Sinner's strong response to Federer: I just try to do my job as best as I can. The Swiss announced that tournaments were seeking similar hard courts so that Alcaraz and Sinner would reach all the finals and thus generate greater revenue. It's a reality that Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner have been sharing the most important titles on the circuit lately. But Roger Federer, a tennis legend, denounced that tournaments were trying to place very similar courts so that the Spaniard and the Italian would always reach those finals. Well, Sinner has responded from Beijing. He agreed, yes, but also made it clear that there are some changes. Hard courts are very similar to each other. There are times when there are a couple of changes, small changes. A tournament that comes to mind is Indian Wells, because the ball bounces very high, it's different how the ball reacts when it hits the surface, but yes, more or less we have similar playing situations, said the Italian in words collected by Punto de Break on Wednesday. He defended himself, assuring that this has been happening for a long time and not because of the arrival of his rivalry with Carlos. This has been the case for quite a while. I don't know if there will be changes or not. I'm just a tennis player trying to adapt as best as I can. I think I'm doing a good job. We'll see what the future brings us in each tournament. Beijing is another of those hard courts where Jannik and Carlos arrive as big favorites after their US Open final. Will they fight for the tournament once again? When can Alcaraz and Sinner face each other again? In China, though in Shanghai, they will have the opportunity to face each other if both fulfill their respective matches and reach the final. As world number 1 and 2, each will go on one side of the draw in all tournaments, making it impossible to see them in a match that is not a final with a trophy at stake. What seems practically impossible is that Sinner can steal the number 1 from Alcaraz before the end of the year, since the gap between them is very large and the number of points the Spaniard defends is less than that of the Italian. It would be more likely for the Mercian to widen the gap than for Jannik to close it. When a few weeks ago the first poster for the second edition of the Six Kings Slam was presented, controversy arose. As headliners appeared Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz, while the world number 1, Jannik Sinner, was relegated to a secondary role. After complaints from fans, the organizers made another alternative poster, in which the Italian occupied the Spaniard's place, but what they did not touch was Djokovic's presence as headliner. Nor was he going to be in the draw. Last year, Nadal and Djokovic headlined a tournament that distributes more prize money than anyone else, above Sinner and Alcaraz, who eventually played the final, with victory for the Italian. In the end, their first decision worked out well and today they held the draw with Novak Djokovic as one of the 2 seeds and with the number 1, who right now is Carlos Alcaraz, as the other big favorite. The 2 of them go directly to the semifinals, while the other 4 participants have to play quarterfinals to face one of them. The tournament is an exhibition and what they truly take away is a fortune, since just for participating they receive the same prize as the Wimbledon runner-up, that is, $1.5 million. Sinner, last year's winner, took home $6 million as prize money, something never seen before on the ATP circuit. Sinner enrages all of Italy. The Italian tennis player has honestly answered the question of whether he will be at the Davis Cup finals to be played at the end of November. And his answer has not pleased his compatriots. Sinner has already made it clear that what concerns him is his schedule rather than the benefit of his country. While the world number 1 is thinking of putting the icing on his successful year by winning the Davis Cup with Spain, the Italian wants to finish as close as possible to the Mercian in order to take another bite at him as soon as 2026 begins, since it is almost impossible for him already in 2025. And his statements after the match against Cilic reflect it clearly. Asked whether he will be in Bologna or not to play the Davis Cup finals, the man from San Candido replied bluntly to the journalist, "The Davis Cup? Right now I'm not thinking about that, honestly, it's a decision I still have to make." After becoming the hero of the Italian team in the last 2 editions, he has set off alarm bells in Italy, which would be less of a favorite without his presence. Likewise, his decision could deprive tennis fans of seeing another final between the 2 best players in the world, since Spain is on the other side of the draw and Alcaraz and Sinner could only meet on court in a hypothetical final. Without a doubt, now it is Filippo Volandri's turn to convince him that they need him in his country to conquer another Davis Cup.